Thanks for tuning in to Ag PhD. I'm Brian Hefty.
And I'm Darren Hefty. Thanks for joining us today. You know, when you look across a field like this, Brian, all you see is, well, it looks the same everywhere, but really underneath in the soil, it's not the same. And we're going to talk about how your fertilizer needs may be different on one acre from the next. We'll talk about variable rate fertility.
Well, when we start talking about fertilizer and inputs going into this next year, there's a lot of talk around the industry that there are going to be some supply shortages, and I guess we wanted to get you up to speed on the things we think are going to be short going into 2013 and the things that we think, you know, there's going to be plenty of. So we want to talk about all that today.
Well, one thing there'll be plenty of is our Weed of the Week, unfortunately, Brian. We'll talk about that later in the show. But first, here's this week's Farm Basics.
Farm Basics is brought to you by the Liberty Link trait and Liberty herbicide from Bayer. The most reliable weed management solution, Liberty Link and Liberty herbicide are the link to efficient row crop production and sustainable weed management.
During our Farm Basics time today, we wanted to discuss keeping stored grain. Now this year was a little different. I'm sure you're aware, if you're a non-farmer, that there were some problems around the country. We had drought in many areas of the United States, and so the crop yields were less than normal, which means that farmers have to store less grain than normal. But there were some problems with that grain that makes storing grain a challenge, even though there were fewer bushels.
Well, when you look at corn, for example, many of the drought-stressed areas had some issues with aflatoxin. And if you've got a mold, like aflatoxin is going to be coming from a mold, you're going to have some issues in your bin with that mold spreading if you have moisture or if you have too much heat. So it's very important on corn to make sure the temperature of stored corn is down below 40 degrees. You don't want to freeze the corn, yet you want to keep it as cool as you possibly can.
Yeah, but you could freeze it. What's wrong with freezing
it? Well,
it?
It's kind of like your refrigerator. You want it to be cool, but you don't want it to be frozen.
Why?
Now, once you have corn that's frozen, you're going to bring out a whole different set of challenges. Once that corn is below freezing, now you're going to have some issues as it thaws out. You could potentially have some moisture issues developing, those kind of things. If you can keep it above freezing, that's where we have the least amount of problems with insects and also with moisture.
Yeah, and that's really what I was trying to get at there, Darren, is to get you to save moisture, because if the grain freezes, then as things are thawing out, there's moisture that's going to come out of that, moisture that's going to end up in your bin, and that can be very problematic because as a farmer, what you're trying to have is grain that has a low level of moisture, and then keep that grain cool. So if it's cool with a low level of moisture, you don't have a lot of problems, usually.
Well, and the other side of that is if the grain kernels are whole, and if the test weight is high, we rarely have problems. But when we have low test weight, as we had in some areas, or we have damaged or cracked kernels, as we did, because many guys were harvesting that corn when it may have been 10 to 12% moisture in some of these drought areas, now it's really hard not to crack up those kernels as you're taking them off the ears.
Well, you've talked a lot about corn, but with soybeans, it's the exact same issue. Soybean moisture got so low so quick because it was very dry, very arid climate we had this early fall when harvest was going on. So there were a lot of soybeans that got cracked up, put into bins, and whenever grain is damaged like that, whether it's corn or soybeans or any type of grain, that's a problem. It's just opened up for much more disease issues, and it's also easier for insects to feed on.
Well, the other thing that happened this early harvest is it was really warm, and much of the grain that was coming in may have been 90 degrees going into the bins. And when it's hot in the middle of the day and sunny and you've got warm grain going into the bins, it's important to have aeration fans to pull some of that heat out of those bins and replace it with cooler temperatures. Now, we've got some temperature monitoring cables in some of our bins, and we've been watching those throughout the fall just to see that our corn that went in that we ran through our grain dryer, for example, to make sure we got that cooled down in our bins, or just the grain that was coming straight out of the field and into bins was getting cooled down as well.
Okay, so it's temperature sensing equipment. What we can determine a lot of times is if we find a hot spot in a bin, that means that grain is starting to spoil. It's starting to go bad. And so we can see, because of this monitoring system that we've got now in a couple of our bins, I mean, it's awesome. You can just look it up on the internet, and I can check anywhere from, you know, I can be on vacation somewhere, Darren, and I can still be looking it up.
Well, that's not unusual for you, Brian, so it is important that we can check that from other areas. You can look at the top of the bin. Many farmers will open the tops of their bins and smell what the grain smells like, and oh, it smells fine. It doesn't smell like it's heating up or anything.
Yeah, but it's a lot more accurate to have these monitors.
There could be a small problem developing way down deep in the bin that you may not sense up at the top.
Well, once again, we just wanted to discuss stored grain, especially if you're a non-farmer. We just wanted you to understand what the farmer has to go through when he's going to hold on to this grain from fall until next summer, because there are a lot of farmers that will hold grain all the way till next summer. I mean, let's face it, somebody has to hold on to the grain next summer because there's tremendous demand come summer. And how much grain are we producing, how much corn and soybeans are we producing that gets harvested in June or July in this country? None. So we've got to hold on to some as farmers.
Well, there's certainly a lot of challenges in the grain bin to protect that grain, but there's also a lot of challenges in the field, like our weed of the week. Can you identify this week's weed?
Why do more farmers choose Genuity VT Double Pro Rib Complete Corn Blend? For maximum yield protection. With 2 powerful ways to control above-ground insects like corn earworm, corn borer, and fall armyworm. Plus convenient refuge in a bag with 95% traded seed and 5% refuge seed. That's simplicity. That's Genuity VT Double Pro Rib Complete Corn, the #1 choice of farmers.
You can't fill a barrel any fuller than its lowest stave, and your crops can't do any better than the nutrient that's in shortest supply. Your yield potential is only as good as the weakest nutrient in your fertilizer program. Give your crops more than just NPK. Prescription apply all the micronutrients your crop needs, each one customized for your crop's potential. MicroLink, linking yield to potential.
Harvest season will soon be over, but don't put away your equipment until you bring it into Titan Machinery, your Case IH dealer. Take advantage of our Uptime Maintenance program. Uptime is Titan's preventative maintenance service designed to eliminate costly downtime during the short working season. Our technicians average more than 10 years of experience and use a comprehensive checklist to find problems before they slow you down. Call Titan Machinery today to schedule your Uptime service so you can spend the winter worry-free. Titan Machinery and Case IH. Better solutions.
Looking to maximize yield? Quick Roots is a microbial seed inoculant that allows the plant root to explore a greater volume of soil, the key to higher yields. Quick Roots continues to generate yield response on corn, soybeans, wheat, and more. Quick Roots is applied to the seeds so the live microorganisms go right to work, enhancing seedling vigor, increasing the uptake of certain nutrients, including NPK, and expanding root volume. Maximize yield on your farm this season. Call TJ Technologies or your local dealer and get your Quick Roots today.
It takes a whole team of people to record a song. Hey everybody, I'm Steve Azar, singer, songwriter, and recording artist. I'd like you to meet Mike Larson, an attorney at Swenson Investments and Commodities.
Like recording a hit country song, it takes a team to put together a good farm estate plan. I work with you, your attorneys, your bankers, and your advisors. What are my chances of touring with you?
About as good as growing a head of hair. Call Mike Larson at Swenson Investments and Commodities.
One of a farmer's least favorite topics is supply shortages, Darren. As a farmer, you want to call your input supplier and say, hey, I want this stuff today, and there's no issue, and the price is cheap too.
Well, I'll say this, Brian, you know, for a lot of farmers that are ordering their products already for next spring and they're taking care of all that business in September and October, they may not see these supply shortages. They may say, well, what are you talking about, to their neighbors in the spring? Because in many cases, you can lock up those tight supply products right now, even take delivery on them. Why not do that, especially if you're fighting Roundup-resistant weeds?
Okay, so let's run through some of the things that we think are going to be really short, and then some other things that people have talked about that we quite honestly don't think are going to be short. So probably the one that is in the worst supply position is Liberty. Can you explain why?
Well, the demand for Liberty Link crops has gone up tremendously as there's been a big spread of Roundup-resistant weeds across the country. So more farmers are turning to Liberty Link crops, which is great. Liberty Link corn and soybeans and cotton are good yielding products. But the problem is, why are they going to Liberty? Because they want to spray Liberty on those Liberty Link crops. And if they can't find enough Liberty, they're in trouble. Well, the manufacturer of Liberty has not been able to keep up with this huge increase in demand because it's come so fast.
Yeah, and don't forget, it's not just the Liberty crops. People are using Liberty now as a burn down in front of Roundup crops as well.
They have been, and that's really what they're going to try to do, is slow down the use of Liberty in the non-selective burn down market when you can really use anything out there if there's no crop up. I mean, there's a lot of different options you could do other than Roundup if it's not working on your particular weed. So they're trying to hold back that usage storage, save the use of Liberty for the in-crop applications. They're going to do that with a variety of rebate programs and so forth.
Yeah, but it's not really a variety so much. It basically just comes down to they're going to jack the Liberty price, and then they're going to give you more rebate if you're buying Liberty Link crops.
Well, so your net price is not that much different necessarily.
If you're planting the Liberty Link crops and using it there. If you're using it in a burn down situation, then it's whole different. You are going to pay significantly more for Liberty in 2013 than you did in 2012.
But here's the way to get around that. For guys that are just ordering seed now and they say, nope, I leave my herbicide decisions for spring, that's the wrong way to do it if you're planting Liberty Link crops. Order the seed and order the herbicide, and then take delivery if you can. Now the challenge with Liberty is it will freeze, so you have to have a heated storage area for it. Perhaps your dealer has heated storage, otherwise you can certainly bring it home if you've got a heated shop at home.
All right, so Liberty is just one product, and that's where we're really most concerned with supply shortages going into this next year. But a general family that I could tell you about would be soil insecticides, things like Aztec, Force, Counter, Lorsban, any of those soil insecticides. And the reason why we're having an issue here is because people are finally figuring out, hey, the VT3 trait or the Herculex trait, that might not be completely doing the job for me, giving me 100% control anymore. So I've got to have something to control rootworms, especially with good yield potential going into next year and a good price.
Well, here's the other thing you forgot, Brian, is Capture LFR. There's really only one liquid choice for corn insecticide, and that's Capture. Now, there's the LFR formulation, which is liquid fertilizer ready. It's a significant improvement over the generic versions of Capture and the older versions of Capture in terms of mixing with liquid fertilizer.
Yeah, but I know, but I'll tell you the reason why I didn't even mention that, because I don't think there's going to be a shortage of Capture LFR. It might be short, but I think there's going to be plenty of supply. And don't get me wrong, I think sales of that will probably be up at least 50% in 2013 over 2012. But I'm especially concerned about these dry products because the manufacturers haven't kept up to speed. In fact, a few years ago, many of the manufacturers sold their products to AMVAC because they thought, oh, these are dead products, we don't need them anyway. Well, guess what? Now AMVAC is sitting on a gold mine because they've got all these products and everybody wants them. And especially with smart boxes. Smart boxes are a very safe way to put insecticides on. It's just if you want smart boxes, you better be talking to your dealer today because there is a limited supply of them.
Well, the reason I mentioned Capture LFR, Brian, is there's really only one choice. If you're out of Capture LFR, you're in big trouble because now there's not another liquid option. So if I'm in that situation where really only one product's going to work, it's the same thing with Liberty. There's only one product that's going to work there. I'm going to make sure I get that one product so I'm not the guy that runs short on it.
Okay, another big family in general that I would talk about, it would be conventional herbicides that control Roundup resistant weeds. And I think it's pretty self-evident the reason why they are going to be in tight supply, because Roundup is not working nearly like it used to work. So a lot of farmers are looking at this across the country. We would just suggest to you, again, order early, pay early, pick up early, and you have to plan ahead. Because the phone calls that I hate the most every year, I feel bad for the farmers that call me and say, hey, I used Roundup once, didn't work, so I went out and sprayed a higher rate of Roundup, still didn't work. Now what do I do? And I say, well, we've got plenty of options if the weeds are 2 to 4 inches tall. And the farmer just says, well, my weeds are 1 to 2 feet tall. You know what? I can't help you anymore.
Well, Brian, we've been talking all about weed control. We forgot about the seed itself. You know, you look at seed corn this year, again, we had hot weather that hurt pollination, so our yields were down in some of the seed corn production fields. And we also had extreme drought where fields that weren't irrigated or where the irrigator just couldn't even keep up, we lost production.
Yeah, but I mean, let's look at the real reason why we're having seed corn supply issues. It's because the big companies don't want to take a lot of risk because the traits are changing so fast, the genetics are changing so fast. It's not like it used to be. If we had the same market we did 20 years ago, there'd be an ample supply, I will absolutely guarantee you. And the reason why is because they're selling, a lot of the companies are selling the same hybrid for 6, 8, 10 years straight. Well, it's not that way anymore. We plant all new stuff every 2 years on our farm, all new. So big company says, I don't want to take all kinds of risk. We just want to plant what we think we're going to sell this next year, and that's pretty much it.
Well, that's certainly the case on soybeans. The switch out on soybean varieties has been pretty rapid, and we're seeing new varieties now with improvements in Phytophthora tolerance or resistance, also improvements in iron deficiency chlorosis tolerance, nematode resistance, all those things, plus the new traits too.
Well, yes, but I guess for both corn and soybeans, don't get me wrong, we believe there are going to be enough corn and soybean varieties out there to plant 10% more acres for next year if we wanted to on either end. It's just that It may not be the exact varieties you want, but there should be plenty of seed out there. We just suggest you order early and pay early, just like everything else. Now, as far as products we don't think are going to be in short supply, fertilizer for one, Darren, there's going to be an overabundance of fertilizer because we see fertilizer rates going down into next year because of the drought this year and the little amount of fertilizer that was actually used this year.
Well, I want to caution people though, because you say, okay, fertilizer rates are going to be down. And I think there are some guys that it's going to be down just because they say, you know what, I had a drought last year, I had a bad crop, I don't want to spend a lot of money. That's the wrong way to look at this. If you are soil sampling in your field and you say, you know what, I've got all kinds of available fertilizer, yeah, maybe I can trim back my rate a little bit if I need to, or the price is ridiculously high for fertilizer this year. But just to say I'm going to cut down because I had a bad year last year, don't get into that trap. That's the wrong way to do it.
Yep, I agree 100%. Now, one last thing we were going to point out, when it comes to supply, a lot of people are concerned about glyphosate supply. Personally, I think we'll be fine on glyphosate supply. There's a slight chance we could have an issue going into next year. I just don't think that's going to happen.
Well, again, there's a lot of shortages out there this year on certain products. Some of these are real. Some of them, you know, are just myths. I don't think certain products are going to get as tight as what you may be hearing. But there certainly are a few like Liberty that are going to get tight. And certainly the new hot hybrids are going to be a little bit tighter than what we would like. Just order things early. Take as many of these things as early as you possibly can. As long as you can store them in proper storage conditions, you'll be much better off for it.
Well, some of the products you may need to take early will control our Weed of the Week. We'll tell you which ones those are coming up later in the show.
Everything is better to the power of Nutrisphere N. Proven to shield against leaching, volatilization, and denitrification, Nutrisphere N Nitrogen Fertilizer Manager helps you maximize the efficiency of your nitrogen applications. In fact, research shows that in 184 corn trials, Nutrisphere N increases yields by an average of 13.2 bushels per acre. Do the math for yourself. Contact your local fertilizer dealer today and take your operation to the power of Nutrisphere N.
For lower costs and higher production, see your Mandaco dealer. Ask about the best production-built land roller on the market. Mandaco, simple design for easy transport and easy use. 12 to 62 foot widths, heavy-duty 4x8 by 3/8 inch tube frame, and now available with a steerable wing wheel. Mandaco land rollers. Improved soil to seed contact, faster, more uniform germination, less moisture loss. Eliminate downtime due to rocks. See your Mandaco dealer. Visit northcountrymarketing.biz or call 877-915-8790.
Back in 1966, Advanced Drainage Systems, Inc. was the first company to start manufacturing plastic agricultural drainage pipe in the United States. And today, ADS continues our leadership with superior pipe production and service capabilities. Our roots are firmly entrenched in the agriculture industry, and we're committed to helping farmers grow their business. With 54 manufacturing plants and 24 distribution yards throughout the world, you can count on ADS and our green striped pipe to be there when you need us. Advanced Drainage Systems, the green striped pipe you can count on.
Advanced Farming Systems from Case IH helps producers be ready. Our precision farming solution is less complex and built right into our equipment. Factory integrated with open architecture, AFS works with all of your implements, no matter what color they are. And our team of dedicated specialists are here to keep you rolling 24/7, 365. The world of farming is changing. Will you be ready?
I'm ready.
For years, FarmLogic has been the easiest and most convenient way to keep up with your farming operations. Well, it just got better. Introducing FarmPad for your phone. You always have your phone with you, so entering records as they happen is as easy as a touch of a button. Chemical database, GPS, service records, and more. When you do it on the farm, save it on your phone and it's backed up forever. Call or visit farmlogic.com for a free trial and find out why FarmLogic is the best decision tool for the farm.
Variable rate fertilizer. This is something that's really starting to take off around the country, in part because farmers now have the technology to do it in their own operations. I'm excited just to be doing it on our farm in a strip till situation, Darren.
Well, okay, you talk about it and you say, well, I'm going to variable rate my fertility. That's a great thing, Bram, because there's certainly differences in the field in terms of productivity, so we may have to feed certain areas a little more or a little less than others. That's fine, but how do you set up a plan? Because a lot of farmers say, well, I don't even know where these different zones are at in my field. How do I know how I'm going to to vary my rates?
Well, the number one thing that I will say is if you want to vary rates, look at it by soil type. So my real quick example is we've got some really good land, but there are some sand belts that run right through it. So in a drought year like this, we literally had 0 in the sand, and we had 220 bushel corn in some areas of the rest of the field. So that's kind of a no-brainer because for years we've been putting the same rate of fertilizer all the way across. I'm pretty certain, and soil tests will prove that out, that we have more than enough P and K to raise about as much as that sand can possibly produce next year. So why dump a whole bunch more out there? So we're literally in some areas putting on 200 pounds of potash in the good areas and 25 pounds of potash in the bad areas. We're varying it that much, no kidding.
And it makes economic sense, but it also makes sense environmentally that why would I throw a whole bunch of fertilizer out there that could move off my field and end up in a river or a lake or something like that? We don't want to have that happen.
Well, let's talk
smart.
Yeah, but let's talk specifically then about nitrogen. Take 10 times your cation exchange capacity number, and that'll tell you roughly how much nitrogen your soil can hold at any one point. So in these sandy areas I'm talking about, our cation exchange capacity is somewhere around 10. So we can put on 100 pounds of nitrogen safely. All right, well, the rest of the field is going to need 200 pounds of nitrogen. Should I put 200 pounds in these bad areas?
Absolutely
no way.
not.
Right. So now with variable rate fertilizer, I can do that. And again, I can save money and be good for the environment.
Well, the other thing to look at is just taking good soil samples. And you say, all right, I'm not exactly sure, what soil types are where in the field, or maybe it's some new ground to me. Do some grid sampling in those fields and get to know what that field is all about. We've seen quite a variance again this fall, especially when we had this drought. And we had some areas that, as Brian mentioned, that completely burnt up and we had no crop. Well, there may be quite a bit of carryover fertilizer there, but you want to do some soil testing to see if it's going to be available.
Yeah, because the whole thing is you want to figure out why am I having bad yield. If you just do variable rate fertilizer based on a yield map, I don't feel that's the right way to go. And I'll tell you the reason why. Because what I find in a lot of areas of the country, the yield is poor, not because the ground's poor. It's because we haven't properly fertilized there. So what we're telling you here, for most of you, is probably not rocket science. You're probably familiar with some of the variable rate work that's being done. The reason why we're talking about it is twofold. Number one, we just want to motivate you to do something on your farm and take a look at it. And number two, we're coming off one of the worst droughts in history, and this of all years is a good time to start variable rating fertilizer because there's a lot of untapped fertilizers still just sitting in your ground. Why double it up again? And then there are other areas in that same field, maybe just like on our own farm, where we used more than what we applied this year. So we got to make sure that we're properly fertilizing.
Well, one other thing that may vary across your farm is weed pressure, especially if you have our Weed of the Week. We'll show you how to control it coming up next.
The Weed of the Week is brought to you by Mandaco.
For lower costs and higher production, Mandaco leads with versatility unmatched. Twister is the vertical tillage unit for no-till as well as conventional tillage. See your Mandaco dealer. Visit northcountrymarketing.biz or call 877-915-8790.
Our Weed of the Week is Russian Thistle.
Well, Russian Thistle is a weed that Darren and I are quite familiar with. We've dealt with it since we were little kids. Kind of looks like a little Christmas tree. And where we would find this a lot of times was where we spread manure.
Well, it's one of those weeds that does a lot of times come in the feed source. And actually, if you've got some Russian thistle weeds around those hog pens as we did when we were kids, those pigs like to eat them too. And I think that was part of the reason we were spreading so much Russian thistle around. Well, it was originally brought into our country or believed to be with some flax seed that came out of Russia. I think this is probably what caused the Cold War, Brian, at least with farmers anyway. But really, when it comes to controlling Russian thistle, you have to start with a pre-emerge herbicide. This is one that gets a good early start on us in the spring. If we aren't getting ahead of this weed, we're going to have trouble controlling it post-emerge.
Yeah, it can get ahead of you, but it is just an annual weed, so it's not the worst weed in the world. Just start with that good pre like Darren's talking about. Soybeans is where we have the most trouble with Russian thistle, just like a lot of other broadleaf weeds. So to begin with, I would put down Authority MTZ. That's my favorite product on this particular weed. If you do that along with a Prowl, Sonalan, or Treflan, you'll have virtually 100% control.
Then post-emerge, you can come back with Cadet, but come back early if you can. If you're back when the weeds are fairly small, Cadet does a nice job burning them back. Turning to corn, you can start out with Balance Flex in states where it's labeled. Otherwise, Verdict does a really nice job on Russian thistle as well. Post-emerge status is by far the best choice. And in wheat, we look at pre-emerge treatment of Sharpen, followed by Husky post-emerge.
Once again, our Weed of the Week was Russian thistle. It is just an annual weed, and it's not all that difficult to control as long as you start with a good pre-emerge herbicide. Well, that's it for our Weed of the Week, but stay tuned. Iron Talk is coming up next.
Iron Talk is brought to you by Case IH. The world of farming is changing. From the power and versatility of Steiger and Magnum tractors to the legendary reliability of axial flow combines, Case IH can help you be ready. To learn more, visit caseih.com/be ready.
For many farmers with Tier 4 engines, their biggest concern is, how do I keep the DEF fluid from freezing? We'll talk about storage of DEF on today's Iron Talk. When we think about diesel exhaust fluid, or DEF, it's really just 32.5% urea and deionized water. It comes in totes. Now those totes are not freeze-proof, so when you're moving and storing totes, you need to try and keep them in a warm storage area if at all possible. The good thing is, if DEF does freeze, you can warm it right back up and it comes back into solution without harming the product or its effectiveness. In many cases, if it's already next to your engine, just the warmth of the engine will warm it back up and get it back so it's working for you again. I've had many questions about the new engine technologies and how they're working. We'll talk more about that on a future show. But the SCR engines, or selective catalytic reduction engines, have really been good. We've shown about 3 to 5% savings on diesel consumption, and we've reduced emissions to almost zero. And the good thing when you're mixing this DEF, or this liquid urea, with the exhaust that's coming out of your engine, it mixes and chemically forms two different things. One is nitrogen gas, which is about 78% of our atmosphere, so that's harmless. The other one is water vapor. That's harmless as well. So the emissions come out clean and our engines are more efficient. That's it for this week's Iron Talk, but there's more Ag PhD to come after this.
Speed, strength, and efficiency make Capello corn heads a head above the rest. Built with polymer components that exceed industry standards, Capello corn heads continue to push the boundaries for maximizing grain retention while using less energy. Visit CapelloUSA.com and learn more about Capello's state-of-the-art chopping technology that cuts cleaner, allowing your horsepower to remain where it belongs, with your combine, so you can harvest faster in all weather conditions. Add to that an amazing folding feature, and it's clear to see why Capello is a head above the rest.
Hey Brian, it's Farm Guy.
What brings you to our farm?
I watch Ag PhD every week and know that you guys do a lot of field testing.
We test a lot of products here, and when something works, we use it on our farm.
Oh, like agriculture liquid fertilizers. You guys started talking about Pro Germinator and SureK on the show a few years ago.
But I was skeptical.
You're always skeptical.
Should Brian be skeptical of agro-liquid fertilizers? Find out at www.farmguytv.com.
Looking to maximize yield? Quick Roots is a microbial seed inoculant that allows the plant root to explore a greater volume of soil, the key to higher yields. Quick Roots continues to generate yield response on corn, soybeans, wheat, and more. Quick Roots is applied to the seeds so the live microorganisms go right to work, enhancing seedling vigor, increasing the uptake of certain nutrients, including NPK, and expanding root volume. Maximize yield on your farm this season. Call TJ Technologies or your local dealer and get your Quick Roots today.
Advanced farming systems from Case IH helps producers be ready. Our precision farming solution is less complex and built right into our equipment. Factory integrated with open architecture, AFS works with all of your implements, no matter what color they are. And our team of dedicated specialists are here to keep you rolling 24/7, 365. The world of farming is changing. Will you be ready?
I'm ready.
Closed captioning for Ag PhD is sponsored by Norwood Sales.
Introducing the all-new Backsaver Swing Hopper Auger Mover. Backsavers have interchangeable parts which allows you easy access to move or swing your augers to fit your harvesting needs. Get yours today at Norwood Sales.
That's all the time we have for today's show, but be sure to join us again next time for another Weed of the Week, Iron Talk, Farm Basics, and a whole lot more. I'm Brian Hefty.
And I'm Darren Hefty. Thanks for watching Ag PhD.
No one cares more for the environment than family farmers who plan to pass their land down to their children. These same farmers are working to double yields over the next 15 to 20 years to feed the growing world. To learn how they plan to do it, visit the Responsible Nutrient Management Foundation at rnmf.org.